Hello all, in this video we are going to see how Informatica Integration Service shares static lookup cache for these three different scenarios. So the first scenario is you have more than one static lookups placed in same mapping and in same target load order group. Second is you have more than one static lookups placed in same mapping but in different target load order groups. And the third is you have more than one static lookups placed in different mappings and in same or different target load order groups. Now in order to validate this scenario we are going to create a simple mapping. So employees table will be our source table. Give the mapping name as lookup cache static. Take any target table, let's say take interim table, and we'll be adding a filter prior to a target table, and filter condition we're going to keep as false. So basically we are not going to insert any record in our final target table, since here we just have to observe the lookup cache sharing of static lookups. There is no need to add any data in the final target table. So let's create a lookup transformation on departments table. Let's forward the departments port to the next lookup. Change the data type from string to integer, decimal to integer. Add the condition. Create the expression transformation. Now again forward the same department ID to the next lookup, basically the second lookup, and add another expression. We have to add condition over here. Change the data type to integer, add the condition. We have done with the mapping. So in the mapping we only have one pipeline and two lookups, and for each lookup we haven't specified any SQL override. So for both the lookups, whatever the SQL query will get formed, default query, it will be same. So let's create the workflow. I will remove this default Oracle connection, we don't need that. And generate workflow, next. Since the Teradata TD connection which I have created, that is based on the DBC database, and source, target and even the lookup table is available in the financial database. So we have to specify the database name at workflow level. Owner name, table name prefix, similarly at lookup level. We are done with the workflow as well. Let's start the workflow and see. So here the first lookup for which the cache file will get created is the lookup LKP, and ideally LKP1, the second lookup, should reuse the cache file or cache which got created for LKP. Let's check the same thing at session logs, get session log. So for LKP, for the first lookup in the pipeline, Informatica Integration Service has created the default SQL. So this default SQL will be based on input output ports and the lookup condition which you specify. Let's go forward. So as you can see, for first lookup it has created a default cache file, and using that cache file it has built a cache for this first lookup. Now if you check the second lookup, so the second lookup in the pipeline, basically it's a last lookup. It has reused the cache from memory of the first lookup LKP. That means when you have more than one lookups in the same target load order group, for the first lookup Informatica will create the cache, and for subsequent lookups in the same target load order group, first lookup cache will get reused. And for subsequent lookups it will build the cache from the memory. Now let's check the second scenario in which we'll be validating the same thing when we have more than one static lookups in different target load order groups. Let's copy this entire pipeline. Check the target load plan. So still the first pipeline which will get executed is the first one, interim table, and after that the interim table one. Okay, so refresh this. We'll have to perform few modifications at session level. Similarly, the lookup table name which we have to specify for new lookups which we have added. Done. Let's run the workflow now. So here we have four static lookups. First two are in same pipeline or same target load order group, and second two are in different target load order group. First lookup of this mapping is the LKP, because interim table is the first table according to target load order plan. Okay, so Informatica will create the cache for LKP lookup first, and let's see how it will use, or will it really reuse the cache created for this first lookup for all the subsequent lookups. Just check the session log, find LKP. So for the first lookup, as expected, it has created the default SQL. Using that SQL, it has created the default cache file, which is ultimately getting used to build a cache for the first lookup. Now this is the second lookup of the same pipeline, or the last lookup in the first pipeline, which has reused the cache from the memory of the first lookup LKP. Let's check the first lookup in the second pipeline now. So this is the third lookup or the first lookup in the second pipeline, which again reuse the cache created by the first lookup in the first pipeline. Similarly, the last lookup in the mapping. So basically, when you have static lookup and for all the lookups, the SQL override is same. Informatica will reuse the cache created for the first lookup for all the subsequent lookups. So for first lookup, it will again create the cache. For all subsequent lookup, first lookup cache will get reused. I will copy these statements. Now we have to find out how it will work when our lookups are in different pipelines, or sorry, in different mappings. So let's copy the same mapping, lookup static cache. I want to make a copy. I will rename it to part 2. So in a second mapping, let's specify the target load order plan. So again, interim table will be the first table. So basically the second pipeline will get executed first. That means LKP will be the first lookup for which Informatica will try to create the cache file in the second mapping, and these are the subsequent lookups. Okay, let's refresh the workflow. We'll add another session, task create session SM lookup cache part 2. We have to perform few changes. I have to specify owner name, at source, target, and even for the lookup table. Done. Now let's run the workflow. Let's check the session log of first workflow, or sorry, first session, LKP. So as expected, for the first lookup in the pipeline or in the mapping, it has created the default SQL. Using that SQL, it has prepared the default cache file, which is ultimately getting used to prepare a cache for the first lookup, and the same cache which is available in the memory is getting reused for all the subsequent lookup in the same mapping. Now let's check whether cache created by the first lookup in the first mapping is getting reused in the subsequent lookups of a second mapping. Find LKP. So here the default cache which Informatica has created for the first lookup of a first mapping is not getting reused in a second mapping. So in the second mapping, for the first lookup transformation, it had again created the default cache file to build a lookup cache. So integration service won't reuse default cache file for cache file of static lookup when they are in different mappings. Now what will modify some changes at session level. Currently whatever the settings we have, so according to existing settings it's unnamed cache and it's even not persistent. Now we'll modify first session and we mark it as a persistent cache, each lookup basically. And we'll give some name, so it's basically we'll define the name cache. So cache sharing test, we'll specify same cache file for all the subsequent lookups. This will be our first lookup and Informatica will share the cache file of this lookup with all the subsequent lookups. Same cache file will give for second mapping as well, second session basically. Persistent cache, done. Let's run the workflow. Let's check the session log of first session. So it has prepared the default SQL for the first lookup. Now here in this case, instead of preparing a default cache file, it has prepared the cache file as per the name which we have provided at session level. And since this is a persistent cache, it will reside in the in this particular directory. That we'll check later on. And so for the first lookup of the first mapping, it has built the cache using this cache file, persistent cache file. Let's check for the subsequent lookups. For this is the second lookup in the first pipeline of a first mapping. It has reused the cache from the memory itself. Okay, so this is the first lookup in the second pipeline of the first mapping. It has reused the cache file instead of building the cache from the memory. Now in this case it has built the cache from the cache file. Now this is the last lookup in the first mapping of a second pipeline. So it has reused the cache from the memory of the third lookup. That is the or you can say first lookup in the second pipeline of a first mapping. Now let's check the behavior in the second session. Find LKP. So here, instead of creating a different cache file, Informatica has reused the existing cache file, since we have asked to do that. So it has reused the existing cache file instead of building any new cache file. For this is the first lookup transformation in the second mapping of a first pipeline. Now we'll check the second subsequent lookup transformation of a second mapping. So this is the last lookup transformation in the second mapping of a first pipeline. So basically it has reused the cache from the memory itself of the first lookup. So again, this is the third lookup or the first lookup in a second pipeline of a second mapping. It has reused the cache file. So this cache file basically was built by first lookup transformation in a first mapping. And let's check the last lookup transformation. So again, the last lookup transformation in a second mapping and second pipeline has reused the cache or built the cache which is there in the memory of the third lookup transformation. So basically, if you want Informatica to reuse the cache files in a different mappings altogether, you have to mark those lookup transformations as the persistent lookups, and you have to name those cache files. So basically, named cache files of persistent lookup can be shared across the mapping. Thanks for watching this video.